Today I've got something completely different for you. The guest you're going to hear from, he's someone I met during my recent trip to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I was covering a conference about sex and gender. You may remember that one of my recent guests, Mia Hughes, was a speaker at that event. Except this guy you're going to hear from today has nothing to do with that conference. And by way of explanation about how I booked him, see, I have attention deficit disorder, so when I go to these conferences, I find it hard to stay focused on the proceedings the whole time, so I often duck out periodically to play disc golf at a local park. And when I was in downtown Albuquerque, the place I duck out to was called Roosevelt Park, which happens to have a full 18-hole disc golf course. So there I was on the last day of the conference at Roosevelt, throwing discs, when I noticed that there's a big gathering on one side of the park, a sort of fundraising potluck event organized by a group called Millions for Prisoners New Mexico. Turns out that's the name of a community activist group that operates on behalf of prisoners, ex-prisoners and their families, and which generally advocates for the end of America's industrial prison system as we know it. I know all this because the organizers had speakers set up so I could hear all their speeches, even as I was walking around the park throwing discs. And then, toward the end of the event, this comedian gets up. His name is Matthew Pettit. He's the guy who's my guest today. And he starts telling jokes. This is the entertainment part of the event. And about 30 seconds into his routine, I realized, okay, this is not an ordinary comedian. But rather than describe his act, I'm going to play a clip from it right here. And I just want to warn you, if you have young kids in the room or you yourself don't like sexually graphic material, hit the stop button. This is not for you. Come back next week when I'll be interviewing Professor Paula Fredrickson about her new book about the history of early Christianity. This week's podcast is quite different, okay? Duly warned. Without further ado, this is Albuquerque comedian, student, and community support worker Matthew Pettit performing at a recent gig.
So, out here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we are really popular for some things, like meth, auto theft. Another thing that we're pretty popular for, I don't know if you know this, we have 29% higher than the national average of ACEs. And if you don't know what that is, it's an adverse childhood experience. So I got molested a whole bunch as a kid, and at first I was really frustrated about this. I was like, this is fucked up. Until I got older and I realized that 2023 status quo, you're gonna get ass fucked by a little dicked white man. And for me, I just started early. You know, like y'all had to wait until you had to pay taxes or get a job or some shit. And so you're like, oh, this is fucked up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's cool. Just go with it, bro. It's fine. You know, I think that what the problem really was is it really fucked with my sexual identity. You know, when you start having sex super young and it's same-sex sex, I just didn't understand what was going on anymore. You know, people are like, how do you identify? I'm like, well, FUBAR, mostly. Fucked up beyond all recognition. Anyway, the first time that I ever remember masturbating by myself was to the movie The Lion King. And I was watching it, and like the scene where Simba and Nala are wrestling down the hill, and Simba like pins Nala, like, and she gives him like, ooh, fuck me eyes. That really got me going.
Okay, so I warned you it was a little raunchy. Anyway, there I was back in September, walking around Roosevelt Park in Albuquerque, throwing discs, jet-lagged, and wondering as I listened to Matthew, is this real? Am I really listening to a guy tell jokes at a public event about suffering sexual child abuse from a young age, and then spending 20 years addicted to meth while bouncing around New Mexico jails? I remember in that moment worrying, am I even allowed to laugh at this? Anyway, by the time Matthew was done his set, I determined I very much was allowed to laugh at it, and I was determined to learn more about the guy's life, the challenges he overcame to go clean, and his journey toward becoming a community advocate. I also wanted to ask him about some of the emotional contradictions that I assumed must be part of his life. On one hand, he's someone who knows all about the cruel and often counterproductive nature of America's prison system. On the other hand, he was sexually victimized from a young age by someone who, at least in my view, certainly deserves to be behind bars. These are the subjects I spoke about with Matthew Pettit, Albuquerque-based comedian and the founder of the recently established substance use recovery group, Healing Roar. Matthew Pettit, thank you so much for joining the Quillette podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Okay, so as I told listeners in the introduction, I came across your act in a kind of a random way. It was we were at Roosevelt Park when you were doing your act, and I was there playing disc golf, and I was like, wow, this is not your usual comedian. Is it tough getting gigs when your material is? I mean, you're not exactly saying, hey, what's up with hot dogs? Like, you're it's pretty raw stuff. Is it tough to get bookings?
So comedy in general is kind of hard to get bookings, or at least when you're down here on my level. A lot of the way that it goes is you have to be doing a lot of open mics so that people can hear your stuff, and then they'll start booking you for gigs. When I had more time to invest into it, I was getting booked pretty regularly. And then lately, just because of work and school and everything, now I'm not doing open mics. And so it really only comes around when, someone seeks me out. Interestingly enough, I actually don't struggle too hard to find venues because there's so many venues where my comedy is very appropriate, if that makes sense. I did the Cocaine Anonymous convention. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that because anonymity.
Well, we're not naming names. It
Right,
exists, right? Yeah. The people who go are anonymous. The convention itself isn't anonymous, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, in spaces like that, I don't really struggle too hard. I certainly know my audience. And then other times, there's been a couple gigs where I had gotten booked for a little more white collar sort of venues. And yeah, it was a little bit of a struggle. I mean, I'm surprised that I heard from you because that was not one of my best sets. It was kind of a tough audience or just traumatized. I don't know which one.
Well, okay, so here's the weird thing, and I mentioned this in the introduction, is so the geometry of that park, it's kind of bowl-shaped, and so the audio actually travels really well across the park, even though it's a fairly big park. So you were on one end of the park, and I was sort of playing my disc golf. And even when you were like a couple hundred yards away, because of the way the speakers were positioned, I could hear you a whole bit. I couldn't hear the audience reaction, but I don't know if you heard like some random guy off in the distance laughing, because at first I was like, wow, this is super weird. It's absolutely not what I expected. But then I kind of started getting into it and laughing. So one of my questions was, I have no idea, like, how did you do that afternoon? Was it a tough crowd?
Yeah, it was a little tough.
Okay.
Like when I'm doing comedy, I definitely feed off of the audience a lot, because if I'm looking out there and just seeing, blank faces, then it gets a little harder to keep riffing.
I guess maybe you get asked this a lot. Did you start talking about your life in a comedic form as a form of therapy, or were you always just somebody who, despite all the challenges you faced, you've enjoyed telling jokes, and it just felt natural to tell jokes about your life, however dark some of those chapters were?
I mean, I came across comedy in an interesting sort of way. I've done a lot of time incarcerated. I've done 11 years of my life incarcerated.
I think you said in one of your bits, you said, did you do 6 stints in jail? Is that right?
Oh, uncountable
Okay. Right.
amounts of jail stays. I mean, sometimes it was 2 weeks, sometimes it was 2 years. And I never had to do a lot of straight time. Like the longest I ever felt for was a little over 3 years. Most of the time it was like, do 7 months, get out for 2 weeks, go back for a year, get out for 9 days, go back. And it was primarily just because I was really bad with substances. I wasn't much of a criminal. I was just severely addicted to methamphetamines in particular. And so as a result, they would give me a chance to do probation or drug court or something like that. And because I wasn't able to kick the habit, then no matter what they were trying to help me out with, it would just end up being incarcerated eventually. And doing time, you start to see things different, I think, than a lot of people. We're not very distracted while we're in there. And so, there's a lot of opportunity to talk and try to make the best of every situation. And so, the first time I ever did comedy, that was not the plan. Me and some friends went out for pizza, and they were doing an open mic event there. And I just had my table laughing harder than the comedians did. And they were like, "Why don't you do it?" And I was like, "Because I'm not a comedian." And they were like, "Well, yeah, because you won't do it. And if you know anything about convicts in New Mexico, you just never tell us you won't do it, because then we have to." And so they said, "You won't do it." And I went up there and started doing it. And I didn't know how healing it would be until, I'd started doing booked gigs. And I think the most healing points for me is after so many of my shows, a lot of men in particular come up and they're like, "Hey man, like I didn't even know if it was okay to laugh, and then I couldn't stop myself." And I just want to let you know that, like, I'd never heard anyone talk about that kind of stuff, much less make it funny. And I understand where you're coming from. And so for me, that's super healing to know that, like, hey, these things exist. They're not funny. And at the same time, I think it was Doctor Who that said, laugh at everything because it's always funny. When we can find a way to look at it from a different perspective, then I see healing take place. And it helps me kind of push that envelope of, like, hey, how can I make this thing that happened, that was traumatic, and yet, like, holding on to it just makes it worse. How can I let it go and help other people do the same?
The first couple of minutes, I didn't know how to react, because I was kind of like that guy you said. I was like, even before I got to the question of, is this funny? Like, there was this threshold question of, like, wait a second, am I even allowed to find any of this funny? And then, once I kind of said, okay, well, I'm here by myself, so what's the worst that could happen? I kind of allowed myself to get into it as, I guess, an unwitting audience member. I think one of your bits, I think you said at the time you had been on meth for 20 years and then had been clean for 2 years. I'm guessing there's a lot of people, even people who wanted to help you, are like, well, 20 years, you're probably a lifer. Like, you'll never kick the habit.
Yeah. And that's definitely where I was at. I mean, I had started at 15, well, hard drugs at 15, and stayed pretty consistent until I was 36. And then got an opportunity to go to treatment, and it worked, and haven't used since June 23rd of 2021.
You mentioned in passing that it sounds like you had plenty of opportunities for treatment, in the sense of court-ordered rehab, court-ordered this, court-ordered that. When you say you had an opportunity, can you tell me about that opportunity?
Treatment is hard for so many reasons. If the treatment center itself isn't doing the best job that they can, then it doesn't give the clients the best opportunity that they could get. The first 2 times that I went, it was court ordered, and the first treatment, it was a 28-day treatment center, and I was cured first thing. I got there, and they hopped me up on a bunch of prescription drugs instead of my illicit ones. And about 3 weeks in, I was convinced that I would never use again. And then a young human came in with some marijuana, and I smoked it, of course. And then, as soon as the high faded, the realization set in that, like, I can't even say no to weed while I'm in treatment. And I only have 7 days left before they cut me loose, and I'm supposed to go out and not use, hard drugs. And so I told on myself to my therapist, and as a result, I got thrown out instead of got more help. And that's just an example of what treatment centers can do if they're not in it for the right reasons. And so, that was the first dismal failure. The second treatment center I went to, I had a post-acute withdrawal syndrome. I had a seizure 2 months in, and that got me thrown out of that treatment center. And so it was a third treatment center that was located in Rio Rancho that I only got the opportunity because I got hit by the feds for some alleged money laundering. But it was the middle of the pandemic, and they said that, if I would go to treatment, that they would let me out on pretrial, because they were just trying to get everyone out because of the pandemic. and I went to treatment, and it worked. And I primarily attribute it to the fact that the treatment center cared. I mean, they genuinely cared. They didn't talk to me like I was a convict or a junkie or a number. I mean, granted, I was all of those things, but they saw a person that was in pain. And instead of being there for 30 days like I was supposed to, I stayed there for 6 months. And it was that healing process that made me understand the difference of what sobriety is and what living is. What I mean by that is my attempts at sobriety previous had just been like, go to stay at my mom's, don't have friends, don't go out, don't do anything, and you'll stay sober. Obviously that's not sustainable. And while I was there, I actually learned that, the drugs aren't the problem, I'm the problem. And if I could solve those first, then I could actually have a chance to stay out and living a real life.
It sounds like therapy is a big part of this rehab process.
Well, yeah, tons and tons and tons of it.
When you talk to other people who were in that center who were self-medicating with these destructive drugs, did you get a rough idea what percentage came from this kind of background of abuse that you had endured? Was it common?
I mean, there's a gentleman, Dr. Gabor Mate, who talks really heavily about, if you show me someone that's struggling with addiction, I'll show you someone who is struggling with unresolved trauma. And by and large, I've never met the person that was like, oh, my life is perfect, I have everything I want, I'm going to go do a bunch of meth. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of abuse that, of all different kinds, especially, I mean, in New Mexico, we have a really high a national average of ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. And, so to me, it doesn't surprise me that we have such a bad problem with addiction and criminality.
It's such a sterile phrase, adverse childhood experience, to describe what many times I guess are extremely horrific experiences. I've lived a very sheltered life. I know very little about this except just from reading the news or whatnot. But I know that one of the things they say is if you fall back into your old peer group of people who enable this behavior and, they want, hey, Matthew, we're going out, like, human beings are social creatures. We're going to fall back into old patterns. And it seems kind of inhumane saying, well, you're going out to the world, you got to say goodbye to all your friends. Like, even if you could just come back from a long trip or something, the first thing you want to do is see your friends. And so it must feel weird and even more challenging that you have to strip yourself of your traditional social world. But is that what you had to do?
Yeah. And it wasn't actually as challenging as I thought it would be. I am a very social person, and because I'd lived in addiction for so long, all of my friends were, addicted as well. That's really the main thing we had in common. And so, there was a point in my life where, like, if I wanted clean pee, like, I needed to go buy it from a store because I didn't know one person who could actually do that. When I left treatment, the first thing that I noticed is that my priorities had changed so drastically that I wasn't even necessarily attracted to the same crowd. The main thing that I had in common with that community was the substance. And so, and I didn't just get out of treatment and go back to, where I was at. I left and I went to a sober living community and ended up staying there for another 2.5 years. The one that I went to, the Endorphin Power Company, it wasn't very program heavy. It was just, you get your own room. It's like a kind of like a studio, like hotel room sort of setup. There's no kitchen, there's nothing like that. It's just the room and the bathroom attached to it. But it was a space where I could be, and rent was affordable, especially coming out of a, really long run with substances. And I had a chance to be surrounded by people who have the same goal in mind, which is just, let's not use. And so, now I have a different chance to make new friends who we have something different in common.
Part of your comedy routine is about Albuquerque. Sometimes I do these podcasts and, one of the first things I say, if I say, oh, hi, I just visited your city. It was beautiful. I had a great time. And I did have a good time in Albuquerque, but your city is kind of screwed up. Like it's, I've seen the show. I don't know if you've seen it, Better Call Saul, which is set in Albuquerque, and it presents Albuquerque as just like endless cheap nail salons and liquor stores and crooks and junkies. And it's like every city that has some beautiful and historic places, and the outside, the desert outside is very nice. But a lot of the city is one long, grungy strip mall after another. And so at the event you were at, I think one of the things that the host was saying is that, I don't know if it's true, the Albuquerque police force operates more drones than any other police force in the country.
Yeah.
And you told this story about, this guy on fentanyl who was like walking around at an intersection with his pants down, and you kind of got into an accident because you were watching him. And I actually played that bit in the intro. I did what tourists do. I rented a car and I went up to Santa Fe, and Santa Fe is like, you're surrounded by rich people, and it's like everyone's driving a Tesla or a Lexus and playing golf and $1 million houses, and it's only an hour and a half away or something. Like, it's a study in contrast, right? With Albuquerque, it's like Better Call Saul versus Gilmore Girls. It's an ignorant question. I'm sure many people in New Mexico have an obvious answer, but do you know why this is the case?
Yeah, I don't think that's an ignorant question at all, John. Albuquerque is, historically, it's just confusing. Like the only mentions we have of Albuquerque is like Bugs Bunny took a wrong turn here.
I mentioned that to my friends. They was like, every friend I said, oh, I'm going to this conference in Albuquerque. That was like their only point of reference was Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. Well, and then we got, more famous when Breaking Bad became popular, and then Better Call Saul. And so
I'm the only guy who thinks Better Call Saul was actually the better show, but neither show presents Albuquerque in a flattering light.
And yet accurately, I feel like Albuquerque is beautiful in some aspects that like, we're very artistic. There's so much free expression here.
That event in the park was a kind of exercise in political expression, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it has a lot of history. We're also quite a salad bowl of culture. A lot of it. So like, there's this thing that I call the desert mentality, where there's just not enough to go around. And that kind of bleeds into the way of life. So you see it in business, nonprofits will tear each other down because there's not enough funding to go around. And, unsheltered individuals will be stealing each other's property because there's not enough, tents to go around. And it just seems like that's just the mentality here, is that like everybody needs to make sure that number one is okay. And that causes a lot of issues when there's no actual like community cohesion.
Do you mean it's like sort of a right-wing libertarian culture where people are all out for themselves? Is that what you mean?
I don't want to paint it that way, because there's a lot of great people out here trying to do a lot of great things. I think it's cultural deep, is that idea that like, oh, like, is there enough food for me? Is there enough water for me? And then and only then can I start to worry about others, and sometimes never even get to that point. And then as far as, the rampant unsheltered issues, like we just have so many things bass backwards. We believe in investing in prosecution and in criminalization, and it's just not sustainable. Like they're going out and putting up fences around every abandoned business and every alley, and what it does is it leaves the unsheltered people nowhere to go. So now they're just out in the road. And that doesn't actually help anyone stay safe, and it doesn't actually help them stay safe. Like, I understand that, we're having issues happen in these alleyways, but pushing them out into the street doesn't change the issue.
Have you lived portions of your life without a home?
I mean, not in the same aspect. No, I was, for lack of better words, I was too big of a piece of crap. I know how to break into things, and so like if I have no place to go, I can go steal a Honda and sleep in it. And if I have no place to go, I know how to break into hotel rooms and sleep there. And so, I mean, there's definitely been times in my life where I didn't have like a home. However, I was never like out on the streets in the way that you saw while you were here is happening with so many people. The New Mexican problem is that the price of living and the amount of good jobs that can actually give you a livable wage are in such stark contrast that whether it's, mental health, substance use, which is to me the same thing, fell on hard times, someone went to jail, There's hundreds and hundreds of reasons that people can end up unsheltered out here.
My understanding is that one of the problems with treatment centers is that a lot of the people who work there, you're not paying them a ton of money. And if somebody's making minimum wage, it's really must be tempting to make money on the side selling drugs in a treatment center, because there's going to be some people who are just not going to be able to pass up the temptation. Is that an issue?
What I see more of is behavioral health and money, right? Like behavioral health is a business. Yet when it becomes profitable, most of the time you lose the magic of actually helping people. The treatment center that I went to, that I got blessed to go to, they had only been open for 2 months when I got there. It was only a 30-day treatment center when I got there. Like, they did not have more than 30 days of curriculum to provide. And yet, the owner, one of the owners, just took a special liking to me, and she said, like, "Hey, will you stay? If the courts will let you, and if we can get it approved, would you stay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And one of the issues is, during that time, I'm getting tons and tons and tons of one-on care, because there's only like 12 clients in the whole facility that's meant to safely house a couple hundred. And so I get, one-on-one therapy with multiple therapists. I have, a very intimate small group therapy setting. And because of all of that, hands-on activity and all of that attention, it, I think, was really effective for me. Whereas now, once we can't sustainably keep this treatment center open if we only have 12 clients. So we need to bring in, 90 clients. And if we have 90 clients now, you get to see your therapist once every other week. And group therapy is no longer intimate or one-on-one, or, and weird things come into play, a bad apple or whatever. And so it seems to me that the second there is a chance to make money in the behavioral health field, you start to lose half of the magic that was there, because you had to trade the quality for the quantity.
So the event that you were speaking at, this is in Roosevelt Park, it was people who were against the police state. They were against the prison system. I remember, even as I was listening to your act, I was kind of struggling with that, because even though you were joking about the abuse you endured as a child, I was thinking, well, I hope the guy who did this to you went to jail, eventually at least got arrested, and is paying the price for these horrible things. But you were at an event where people were talking about all the damage that the police do and that the prison system does. And could you talk a little bit about how you balance those things in your mind? Because the person who set you on this course, or, caused you all this trauma, or at least contributed greatly to it, to my mind, is a criminal who belongs in jail.
Really appreciate the question, John. So from my personal experience, jail doesn't help anyone. It doesn't even really do a good job punishing people, if that's what we're shooting for. I can tell you that the individual that I was subjected to different types of abuse by, no, there was no repercussions. And I mean, I imagine I could still pursue that if I wanted to. However, I'm not at that part of my journey anymore. I've never seen jail or prison make someone a better person. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen people get better in jail and in prison, but it wasn't because of the jail or the prison. It was most often because people will make changes in their life when they can no longer continue on the path that they're on. And so for me, I don't, there are processes like restorative justice, which are basically never ever used. However, like, the effective rate as far as outcomes goes is night and day. When we actually take someone and hold them accountable in a realistic way. I wrote an entire article about it for the Albuquerque Journal, which is basically stated that, like, if restorative justice had been used on me early in my escapades, I think that it would have made a lot bigger of a difference and an impact than a year in jail. For me, one of the reasons I was able to commit the types of crimes that I was able to commit was because there was no face. If I'm going out into some random neighborhood in some part of town and stealing a car, I can make a lot of justifications in my mind of who this person is. I'm not hurting them. They're fine. They probably have 3 other cars. They probably have full cover insurance. This is probably their hoopty. I can make up all of these narratives in my mind that make it feel like it's okay to do what I'm doing, because my morals are screaming that this is wrong, and yet I still have to feed this addiction, and so I need to find a way to make it okay. And so because of that, like, I've never stolen anything behind someone's back, if that makes sense. I've never gone up to a friend and been like, "Oh, I like your car," and then waited till they gone inside to go steal their car. Because then I know the person that I did it to, and then I can't spin this new narrative.
You can't create a narrative that's morally justified.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the restorative justice process had been used on me early on, then I would have had to face one of the people that I had harmed, and I imagine I've harmed a lot of people. I would have to hear from, single dad who, had all his tools in the back of his Honda, and now can't go back to work because, I took his car joyriding and stole his tools for meth. And if I was ever had to actually face the person that I was harming, I think that would actually give me some real accountability for what I had done, because I'd have to hear about what I did and how it affected the person that I did it to. Whereas, on the opposite side of the same coin, the vast majority of victims, the first question is why. That's what they want to know. Why me? Why this? Why did it happen? And I think that, if my victims of my crimes had also had a chance to hear from me why it happened, all the context of the crime, I think that that's real accountability, and that's where healing takes place. And so that's how I balance it in my mind, is that, like, I don't agree with police. I'm not saying that every cop is bad. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that our whole process seems to be pretty broken. One of my jobs is I'm the parole success advocate for a nonprofit called Deserving Life, and I help individuals get out of incarceration who are sentenced to extreme sentences as juveniles. So the majority of these sentences are extreme crimes, homicides, things of that nature. And what never ceases to amaze and break my heart is the victims of these crimes, or the families of the victims, 20, 30, 40 years into this prison sentence. I'm dealing with an offender who has had lots of time to sit and figure out life and what they did wrong and how they can make it right. And then I'm also dealing with the victim's family, who has seemed to have no opportunity for healing, who seem to, have nothing but hate and animosity towards this person that committed this crime as a child. And that's one of the reasons where I'm like, look, like, this system isn't just broken for the offenders, it's broken for the victims too. It seems like no one is actually getting any closure to these sorts of crimes and finding a way to move past it and heal. And so, I'm not anti-police. At the same time, I think that when we can come together as a community and support each other and start to understand each other, because there's a great chance that we can all actually understand each other if given the opportunity, then we could actually make real progress as far as the police state and what we're dealing with. APD in New Mexico is real bad. We had a whole
APD is Albuquerque Police Department?
Yeah. We had DOJ down here investigating for a long time, and lawsuits there's a big issue with APD and forcible response. They tend to shoot first and ask questions later.
DOJ, Department of Justice. So it's a federal investigation into the local police force. Even people outside the United States, they heard of Ferguson. They obviously heard of George Floyd, but it sounds like maybe it's not as famous or infamous, but Albuquerque has had episodes like that.
Yeah. I mean, there was a gentleman, Boyd. I don't remember his first name, but he was an unsheltered gentleman that was staying up in the foothills of the Sandias, and someone had called the police on him, and he had a butter knife in his hand, and the police had been telling him that he needed to get up and go, and he got up to leave, and they shot him in the back several times and killed him. And they said that it was because he was armed. And so there's tons of cases like that in Albuquerque where if you commit a homicide with a badge on your chest, then it's a 30-day paid leave.
You mentioned that not all police are bad, but have you had positive experiences with police that were sympathetic to you and treated you with respect?
Yeah, absolutely. anytime we stereotype, we're doing an injustice, right? We can't say that all of these type of people are this type of way. And so I've met wonderful police officers that were in it for all the right reasons. I actually went and spoke at a pretrial convention in California to a whole hotel filled with nothing but judges and policemen, and got an opportunity to go out to dinner with a bunch of them and hear why they became cops in the first place. And it seems like there's always this thread of truth running through that we all want to help people. We just don't seem to know how to do it, or we have different ways of going about doing it.
I have a friend who's he's involved in the criminal justice system, and he's not like a super conservative guy, but his argument for, conventional forms of policing and criminal trials and jails, he says, look, without the threat of jail, it's hard to get people to divert people into court-ordered programs. Like the word divert, you have to divert somebody from something. If I understand your story correctly, the treatment program that ultimately helped you, you wouldn't have been in it if you hadn't have been arrested again and the possibility of going to jail again. I'm wondering how you deal with that tension, that in your story, to some extent, your story of going clean relies on the threat of jail.
That's a really good question. So for me, it wasn't.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, because
No.
Because I've heard this argument a lot. It's like, well, yeah, for all its criticism, because jail sucks so much, that's all the more reason why people have incentive to go to these like more enlightened programs. But if you just went on the street and met somebody who was using meth and said, "Oh, hey, I'm not here to buy your stolen tools, but I'm here to offer you a chance to go to this rehab program," they'd say no, or maybe they'd say no, I don't know. But
They would.
if you give them say, "Well, you can either go to this rehab program, or I'm going to put you in jail for 5 years because you're selling stolen stuff," they're more likely to go to the rehab program, right? So I guess that's what I'm saying, and I'm just curious what your view on that is.
So, and I definitely, I don't feel like I'm on the spot. I appreciate the question. It's very, it's a good question. For me, it wasn't the getting arrested or the threats of going to prison, that, got me sober. Granted, yes, it did get me into treatment. But that wasn't, I've been court ordered to do a whole lot of things in my life, John, and I didn't do any of them.
I don't know why I'm laughing at that, but it sounds funny.
It was the treatment center that worked, and again, like, it's such a dynamic problem, right? Because even treatment centers themselves, they don't work. Like, they don't work in the same way that, like, I can buy a pull-up bar and I can put it in my living room, and I could stare at that pull-up bar every day for 3 years. And then at the end of the 3 years, I could sit here and say, like, you know what? Like, that pull-up bar doesn't work at all. And because the pull-up bar doesn't work, you work. And treatment is always the opportunity to do the work. And I feel like I agree with you. Like, I can't tell you how many times jail saved my life. Not in the way that it was like, like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. It was if I kept going on the current trajectory that I was on that day, there was a high likelihood that I wouldn't still be here.
Because of overdose?
Criminal behavior is what I'll say. I guess my best response is that I don't think we need to do away with jail. I think we need to make jail treatment. Like, you have a captive audience, right? Like, if I have you in jail, you can't leave. You might want to leave, or you might not appreciate what's happening. However, you can't. You can lead them all to water, and then at least some of them are drinking. And I think that that's more of the process that we should be looking at is while we have you in custody, can we work on some of this trauma? Can we work on some of this healing? So that maybe when you get out, it isn't going to be going right back to your same old things. You might have that aha moment where, like, man, I don't want to continue doing this for the rest of my life.
Mother Jones the magazine did a couple of years ago, this huge investigation to like private jails. And the idea is that as much as people hate public jails, at least some of them have programs to help people learn job skills and therapy and stuff. But once you outsource it to a private corporation, all of that, therapy, sports, like that's just extra cost, right? So I don't know what the situation is in New Mexico, whether you have private jails, subcontracted jails, but you have a lot of experience going to jail. And I'm wondering, have you seen a publicly run jail, a privately run jail? Like, is there a difference there?
Oh, yeah. So I've been in every branch, from county, state, federal, and a little bit of all over New Mexico. And so jail, you're never going to get any real programming. So sometimes jails have designated pods for like substance use, like RDAP. And the problem is, it's really just a ploy to get more money from the federal government. Because if our jail has this sort of unit that offers this sort of programming, then the federal government will give them more money. Because the effectiveness of the treatment in jail is it's just not the environment for it. I mean, is the best way I could explain it. I mean, when you're in a space that you need to worry about it, your physical safety at all times, and not being allowed to show emotion and things of that nature. Like,
Well, you can't make yourself vulnerable, right? Like, all therapy requires you to make yourself vulnerable, but how do you do that in a situation where if you do that for a second, that could risk your health, right?
Yeah, vulnerability will leave you exactly that, vulnerable. And so, yeah, I just think that the entire idea of what we see as jail needs to start to change. And I don't know, I know that's not plausible, or like, oh, well, if you could do it better, just do it. I don't think I have the answers. What I do think is that if we can start to shift jails and prisons to being more like treatment, whether it's keep them in a smaller, environment, where they have a chance to experience camaraderie and healing, and the recognition that, like, we don't have to be in here pretending that we're the toughest, 10 feet tall and bulletproof, that we can actually, be vulnerable in that situation and start to do the healing. Because I just feel like I've never met a monster. I really never have. I've met people with a lot of traumatic experiences and maladaptive coping strategies, and because of all of these things, they don't function well in society. But I've never met, the monster that did what they did for no reason.
This reference to monster, I keep thinking, this person who abused you when you were young, often people who abuse one person, it turns out they've abused other people. If this person, if you read in the newspaper that this person was arrested, is it, and maybe the answer is yes, like, would you really want this person to go through an accountability program, and his victims would have an opportunity to talk to him, and as opposed to going to jail? Because if so, you're a better man than me, because I'd want him to rot in jail. But I hate to personalize it like this, but that was
No,
what was going through my mind when I was listening to your act, and then hearing that this was an anti-prison event. Like, this is kind of a thought experiment. If tomorrow they caught this guy, and you didn't have to testify against him, because it sounds like that's its own kind of trauma, you wouldn't want him to go to jail?
no. I confronted him, after several years of my healing journey, and not because I wanted accountability, and not because I wanted validation. I genuinely just wanted him to understand the impact that it had in my life, so that hopefully, you know, moving forward, he has some understanding of how much this can affect someone's life. And I didn't even get that. What I was told is that none of it was real, and that my brain was fried on drugs, which I certainly know is not the case. As far as, like, do I want him to pay for what he did? Uh, I don't understand the type of payment that can make something like that okay, if that makes sense. I feel like I have accepted what happened, and I've done the work that I had to do to heal from the thing that wasn't my fault. And now it's on him what he chooses to do with his life. Because I do believe in, I'm not religious in any aspect, but I do believe that there's bigger and better and badder things out there than you or me. And I feel like When I look at his life and what it's like now, I'm like, hey, karma, man, because we're living very different lives. And if I had to guess on which one of us is happier, I would say this guy.
You mentioned before that, when you're doing bad things, sometimes you tell yourself stories to justify it. So like, you're stealing someone's car and it's like, well, this is some rich jerk and he has a whole bunch of cars and who cares? Like he'll get paid by insurance. And I'm guessing that people who commit much, 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 much worse crimes like sexual child abuse, they have their own coping mechanisms. It sounds like this person had a coping mechanism that you learned about. In the movie version, they just collapse into tears and say, it's true, I'm a monster, I'm horrible. But once you confront them, but I guess in real life, people, they don't want to feel like they're monsters. So they've created fictional narratives to justify it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touched on it earlier. I think that 90% of sexual abusers have been sexually abused.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And that statistic really bothered me at first because I was like, I would never do that to another human being. But I didn't understand the statistic. It wasn't that 90% of people
Right.
who are sexually
that's
abused
important.
go out
Yeah.
abused.
Yeah.
It's just that 90% who do have been.
Right.
And so,
that's an important distinction, an extremely important
Yeah.
distinction. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I feel like there's probably something that happened to him. And again, even when I confronted him, it wasn't about like, oh, I want an apology. Like there's nothing that can be done to him, or that he can do to make right on what happened. Like that was all for me and I needed to figure it out for myself. And I guess again, like I'm sure that he has to justify it in his own mind, or find a way to make it okay. And that's, in my opinion, it's okay. I don't want you to suffer more, because of little old me. I just want you to at least have a reckoning of understanding.
When you do your comedy act, you share like a lot of very intimate stuff, including about sexual, I don't know, fetishes, hangups, psychological things that attend the sex act. And you talk about them. And I noticed at the event, you were there, it seemed like you brought a girlfriend or whatnot. Like she's hearing this stuff. So does you going public with all this stuff make it harder for you to create intimate bonds with people because they're like, wow, it's kind of weird? Or is it like, yeah, I get it. Like I've been through that stuff and I also have my own issues and hangups. And how does this public exposure of how sexual abuse has affected your attitude toward intimacy, how does it affect your ongoing relationships?
Great question, Jonathan. Thank you. So yes, the wonderful woman that was with me was my fiance, and
Congratulations.
thank you so much. And there's like this trauma bond, where she was also pretty abused as a child, and has has her own things, and so like it. I feel like, with my comedy, what I'm trying to do is be as vulnerable as possible, to that point where I can talk about almost anything in a way that people are like, oh, like, yeah, that's weird, or like, yeah, I don't get it. However, like I can get him, because that's just a person being, a vulnerable little clay ball up there in front of everyone. And so, I don't worry too much about like how it's going to impact me. I mean, I definitely, as I continue to move forward, professionally, I'm halfway through my bachelor's degree in social work. And I don't think that once I'm like a licensed therapist that I'll be allowed to still go up in front of crowds and talk about the same things that you got the opportunity to hear. But as of right now, man, I don't worry about it. I mean, as a matter of fact, I kind of count on it, is to make people, not that I'm shooting to make them uncomfortable, but I am shooting to, I guess, open opportunity. Because there's so much that so many people will never talk about because it's behind closed doors, and there's so much shame in it. And I've always heard that the difference between guilt and shame is that Guilt is that I've done something wrong, and shame is that I am something wrong. And that's really hard to deal with. And so I want people out there who have this internalized shame to like see that, like, wow, like there's actually someone out there who's like just living his best life and talking about all the worst things. And like, I'm still happy, and I'm still, it's one of the more therapeutic things that I do in my life. I still go to therapy. But comedy is where I get that chance to go up there and like just be ugly and at the same time like help people see the beauty.
It worked on me. I mean, it was, but the most interesting thing I heard or saw when I was in Albuquerque, and happened by accident. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with my listeners. If there's an electronic place people can go to learn more about your story, or maybe to contact you, do you have a recommendation for them online?
Yeah. So I don't have any social media, which, as a performer, that's
You were a
hard.
hard man to get in touch with. I had to go through intermediaries to get in touch with you.
Yeah. I apologize for that.
No, it's okay. And it was
So
weird. It was a weird inquiry, because I was like, yeah, I was in Roosevelt Park and there was this guy telling jokes. Can you help me out? Like, it was actually a very hard, it's not the way I usually book guests. Let's put it that way.
I'm super glad that you found me, and
Yeah.
and I love having the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners.
So, well, where can they
I think
go?
I have an organization. I'm actually wearing the shirt. It's called Healing Roar. HealingRoar, kind of like a loving lion sort of thing. HealingRoar.com. And it has an easy way to like, you can email me through there. There's a little thing at the bottom, and if you put in email, it'll go straight to me. I work a lot of jobs, so I run my own organization. I'm the empathy lead for Dream.org in New Mexico. I'm a program director and a parole success advocate, and so I mean, most of my information's out there. But I think the easiest way, if anyone's really interested in contacting me, would just be through healingroar.com.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Great to hear your story. I'm glad we made this connection. This was a really special interview. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Jonathan, and all that you're doing.
Maybe I'll see you on the disc golf course in New Mexico next time around.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.